Welcome to the 5 Codes podcast, where we discuss evidence-based methods to elevate yourself to the next level through optimizing the way you look, move, perform, feel, and connect.
Today's OR diary is a unique story about revising my own plan. What I mean by that is somebody who had a plan with me, took it somewhere else to get it done, and then ended up coming back to me to fix my own plan that had been executed somewhere else. And over the years, I've had this happen a few different places in a few different ways. Sometimes it is taking my plan somewhere overseas. I've had this happen in multiple other countries, from Russia to Turkey to wherever else, where somebody consulted with me. We got deep in the process, went through the entire plan. They took our conversation, what I had put together, and tried to have it go executed somewhere else in another country. Sometimes it's here in the United States. The patient that I was with today, who I was revising, had mine done here in Los Angeles, actually. Took my exact plan somewhere else. They tried to execute it, and I think it functions under this idea that, you've gotten my brain, my plans, things I put together, but the ability to execute that plan is very, very different, as a lot of these folks have learned when they ended up kind of coming back later on. I'm not talking about people who maybe got a preliminary idea from me and then took that somewhere else. I'm talking people where we engage in a deep fashion. We had everything sort of planned out, 95% baked, if you will, is exactly what we're going to do. And then the idea is like, well, I'll just have somebody else do this. It's for less money, usually, is why. That's usually the driver, is why people are going somewhere else. And the revision afterwards of those situations has come in multiple formats. Sometimes, on the best case scenario, it's smaller, where I'm fixing the little details that other person was unable to do that are sort of my signatures, if you will. Things around the eyes, the symmetry, the sort of natural expression, things that lost to natural nature we're kind of bringing back, which obviously we don't want to be doing that the second time, because your back's against the wall, if you will, a little bit there. Things can never be as good as they would have been that first time. And so that's like maybe the best case scenario, honestly. In the worst case scenario, and I've had this happen a few times, where the revision situation almost turns into a bigger deal than the original was. And much to people's surprise, sometimes that means it ends up being more expensive than the original procedure would have been. And we can't get to the same place. And so it's these interesting mindsets that I've always tried to grasp, around the financial motivation, which I completely understand. It's not lost on me at all. But then the idea of coming back afterwards, and for me, it's something I understand. It's an open arms welcome. I definitely have to take a deep breath and be like, okay, we're fine. I understand. We can put this aside. We can move forward together. It's just an interesting thing to see coming from all over. Thankfully, that's not the norm. Obviously, most people end up, we do the things that we talk about, but in those unique circumstances where somebody quite literally took it to Russia, had a procedure done, and they come back and it's worse than where they started, and we have to redo the whole thing. This is a real story, and it's more expensive than the original thing was, because it's more time for me and there's more involved. Those are the unfortunate circumstances. The actual patient, the most recent, the one I'm talking about from this week, was more of the in the middle of the road. There were some things that weren't perfect from the previous procedure, but kind of weren't worth redoing. We weren't going to go down that road. There were some things from the other procedure that needed to be redone. And there were some things from our original plan that the subsequent surgeon had convinced this patient that they didn't actually need done. And so they were left off of their first procedure, which in this case was actually not that long ago. Sometimes, it's a year, 18 months, 2 years. In this case, it was not even less than a year later. We're back in the operating room, revising some things, doing some things that weren't done the first time, fixing some of the other things, and kind of working with what we have. I usually approach these situations like I would any revision, and that I want to work with the good parts from before. I want to pick off anything that wasn't done, do the things that didn't get done, and then I want to take kind of the low-hanging fruit of things that we can optimize from the previous procedure and make them better. And so you may say, well, my neck isn't exactly where I wanted. It's like, 7 or an 8 out of 10. I wanted a 9 or a 10 out of 10. But to get to that, we have to redo the whole thing, like literally start all over, and it could be more challenging than it was the first time. And so sometimes in those situations, we just have to accept that, well, we got to live with the 7 or the 8 or whatever it is, and know that there's maybe more out there, but it's not, juice isn't worth the squeeze. It's maybe not worth doing it again to get to the outcome that we're after. And so they're hard conversations. And I humble myself to, be back in it with that patient. I very much value the relationships that I have with my patients. And so it's hard when somebody sort of like doesn't choose you, goes somewhere else, but I understand at the same time. And so re-engaging is often like both people humbling themselves a little bit to get back to that point. And there's stories about this in every relationship, where you're like, oh, maybe I did like that better. I probably should have gone that way. So it's like, a little bit of a hug and move on, and here's where we're at now, and let's make the best out of it. And that's certainly where this was. I think that my patient's experience through the whole revision was sort of like, yeah, this is what I knew would have happened the first time, and should have done that. But here we are, and in the end, we'll come out the other side, in a good spot and better for it and happy. But they're always hard situations, and I understand them, and they happen often enough. And it can be all over the spectrum in the map, but I definitely thought that this was an interesting story, at least worth sharing, and a very sort of middle of the road scenario that we had this week.
If you have any questions or topics you would like me to explore further, please leave them in the comments. I read them all, and they often help shape the future conversations here. If you would like to learn more about my surgical practice, you can visit clinic5c.com, where you will find additional information on my approach to surgery, recovery, and performance-focused care. I also want to be clear that the views shared on this podcast are my own and are not associated with or representative of my clinical teaching affiliation with the University of Washington School of Medicine, nor should this be taken as individual medical advice. Thank you for spending your time with me. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you on the next episode.